In today's video, we'll be looking at the road to battle. So this is basically how we determine the nature of the battle, whether it's a meeting engagement or attack and defence. To do this, we use the pre-battle sheet, which is the road to battle here. There's a couple of markers we need to put on. First thing we need to do, we need to indicate what season it's starting off. So it starts off at spring, and we also need to mark down the road to war, which starts on 9, and that's our countdown before the battle begins. The road to battle is each player alternately picking one of the two routes towards the battle. The first one is either good ground, which is basically terrain selection down on the left hand side of the sheet, and the other is political favour, which are in-game events that aren't necessarily linked to the battle per se, which is on the right hand side. The terrain is typically determined by the scenario pack. So in this case we're just using Glory to the Lord for the Western Theatre for the American Civil War. The terrain is all defined in the terrain section. There are some standard terrain types, so coast or hills or woods, but there are also other terrain specific for that geographical region. So for the American Civil War, it'd be snake fence or creeks or cultivation. Normally you would pick which one of the two routes you would go down to start off with, but the American Civil War, because it was typically terrain heavy, the battlefields, insist that each player's first two selections need to go from the terrain good ground route. Just to do this quick example, we just got the Confederates on this side of the table and the Union on this side of the table. In the centre is the black box. This is the box where we keep the dice, because each terrain or each event will have a link to a number of attack dice, and that will ultimately determine the attack and defender in the scenario. The default situation is always going to be a meeting engagement. So we'll just assume that the Union are just trying to defend in this scenario, just to pick it out of the air. And what they're going to try and do is they're going to try and put a traverse road on. There are certain terrain that is favourable to the defender and some that's favourable to the attacker. So it's important to understand what your objective is and how you want to approach the battle. So what I'm going to do is, as the defender, I'm going to use this section here. Okay, this is the placing a road section, and I'm just going to put the traverse road on. Okay, I'm just going to put on row 3. So the rows are always in relation to the placing player. So row 1, row 2, row 3. If I place terrain in the first 3 rows, it's typically a defensive action. If I put it in rows 4, 5, 6, it's typically an aggressive action. So because it's a defensive road, I just put 1 dice in the pot. So we've placed our terrain, we've placed our dice on the table. We next need to determine whether that counts down the battle or whether that generates an objective. So the first thing we have to do is determine if it's based on an objective. So objectives are always linked to non-linear terrain. So this is a road, it's a linear terrain feature, so therefore it will never count towards the objective, so there's no need to test for that. The second test is simply a countdown. So each dice on the board, you roll 1 dice, and if you roll a 6, it counts it down, which it does not, so therefore we carry on and pass to the Confederate player. So next up, it's the Confederate player's go. So as the Union's trying to defend, then let's try and make the Confederates attack. So they're going to pick a road also, but they're going to pick one that's perpendicular to their base edge. So that is an attacking road. It's the route to the battlefield. So I'll take one of their dice, and they put it on the perpendicular space there. Then they will just place their road on the table. So we'll put that there. Because it was perpendicular to the baseline, that adds 5 dice to the pot. So you just put 5 attacking dice in there. Next we have to count down the battle. We know we've still only got linear terrain on the table, so therefore there's no reason to try and count for an event. So it's now counting down 2 dice this time. So the Confederates throw 2 dice. They throw no 6s, therefore it's no countdown. So back to the Union. So they've placed one of their 2 compulsory pieces of terrain to start off with. So this time they're just going to place a wood. So a wood space is here. So to place the wood, we can either place it in any one of the rows or either direction. We can either put it on row 1 or row 2, and that's a defensive hill, or 4, 5, 6. We can't superimpose the wood over the road. We could put a road over a wood, but not the other way around. So roads actually define clear spaces on the table. So what we're going to do, because we are the Union, we want to try and defend, we're going to try and use this wood to try and block our flank. So we'll just put it over there, and it's a defensive hill. So what that means is we end up putting dice in the pot, 1 dice because it's a defensive hill. So again, it's the check for objectives, check for countdown. So this time we have placed a piece of non-linear terrain. So we're just going to throw a single dice for each piece of non-linear terrain. So we're just going to throw 1 dice. It's a 3. So we're over here looking for 6s. So there's no objective still. And then we throw 1, 2, 3 dice for the countdown. We'll always count the dice on the sheet. So there's no 6s, so we don't count just yet. So what you can tell as the dice build up, then it will start to speed up on the countdown, so the first few will be quite slow. So it's back to the Confederates' turn. So this time they're going to pick a piece of other terrain, which is this section down here. So they're just going to pick a bit of bad going. Okay, so we place a dice to indicate that that's one piece of terrain they've placed there, and then we're just going to place it over here. So they're placing bad going really just to try and disrupt the Union line. So they're going to place it on row 6 for them. So at the end of the second Confederate piece of terrain, we have to see if there's an objective based yet. So the premise being that the more non-linear terrain, the more likely it is to be an attacking defence type battle. At the moment it's still meeting engagement. So we now throw 2 dice, because there's now 2 pieces of linear terrain on the table, and there are no 6s, so therefore still no objective. And then we're all for countdown, which in this case is now up to 4 dice, so we're looking for 6s to count down. So we still throw no 6s, so we're still going. Back to the Union's third turn. So this time we're going to place a town. So there are only ever 3 towns on the table, so this is the first. That does add 5 dice to the pot. Placing the town, we'll just go over here. So we're going to place it defensively in this row here. So towns, or actually any terrain, can be typically 1 or 2 squares in size. Specific to this scenario, towns in the American Civil War can only be 1 square in size unless they are on the edge of the table and also touching a road. So in this case we're just going to put a small town there, and that also unlocks a piece of snake fence for us, so we can just put adjacent to that. So it's just a small homestead there. Back to the test for objectives. We've now got 3 pieces of non-linear terrain. Throw 3 dice this time. So we still don't throw a 6, so it's still meeting engagement. And then we throw down for countdown, so this time we're throwing 5 dice. So eventually it's going to start speeding up. So we throw 2 6s there, we count down the road to war twice, down to 7. So the Confederates' third choice. So because the Union have placed a village, that actually put a lot of blue dice into the black box. So actually that means that the Confederates no longer are more numerous in that pot. So they want to try and push their advantage to attack. But to do this, they want to put as much terrain as they can on the Union side. So in this case, we're going to put another wood, and we're going to place it next to the first wood over there. So we're really cluttering up the side of the table for the Union. What that means is that will disorder the Union troops who are going to be positioned there and make it more difficult to advance through. We put our second dice for the wood over here, and we're now back to checking whether there's an objective in the game. So we've now got 4 pieces of linear terrain. So we roll 4 dice and we roll a 6. So therefore we put down 1 dice on the first objective spot. The road to battle ends when either there are 3 objectives or we count down on the road to battle there. So what that means now, it's no longer a meeting engagement. It's going to be an attack-defense type battle with at least 1 objective. The Union player for his next selection will try and get a bit of political favour. To do this, the first step you need to do is to determine whether you're going to gamble any of your leadership rating. So in this case, the Union leader is rating 3, so he can risk up to 3 of his leadership ratings for 1 dice on this table. So we'll try 2. So this gamble is not without risk. So we're going to throw these 2 dice. Any 6s that we throw, 1 leadership point will be permanently deducted for the remainder of the game. No 6s, everyone's happy. What that means is that we now get a +1 to the dice throw on the event table for each dice you've gambled there, each leadership point you've gambled. So we're going to get 1d6 +2 on the table over there. So we just go to that table, so we're going to throw a single dice. We throw in a 3, which bumps up to a 5, which means that the Confederates must downgrade 2 of their units to conscript rating. Okay, that's a good thing. The event in the table puts 1 dice into the pot, and we also need to mark the first event on the table. We now need to roll to see if there's any more objectives. So it's events and non-linear terrain. So we've got 4 pieces of non-linear terrain, and we've also now got 1 event. So it's 5 dice this time. We throw no 6s, therefore there are no more objectives. And then we roll for countdown. So this time we're now throwing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dice. So you can suddenly see how it starts building up towards the end. So we've actually thrown 4 6s there. So that counts down 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're just 3 away from the battle beginning. So it's the Confederates' turn to pick. There are some decisions to be made now. So we've got 3 slots remaining on the countdown, and the terrain actually looks very congested on the Union side. It's attack and defence. If the Union do get defence, they're going to have a very strong position with a single objective to defend, and all the terrain is on their side of the table. Being the defender, they will get a reduction in troops. However, if the Union end up attacking, and at this moment it's not guaranteed that they'll defend, then the Confederates will have a very open table to defend. So as such, what they probably want to do is just get some terrain on their table just in case they do have to defend. And as such, they're going to try and get some good going on there, some good ground to defend on their side of the table. So the Confederates are going to pick another homestead, a town. They put their second town down there, and they're going to try and make it quite defensive in nature. So they're going to put it on row 3, which is on their side of the table. Put that there so the road can go through a town. Just put a bit of buildings on there. And again, that gives us 1 piece of snake fence that can go along that terrain piece like that. Side edge. So that puts them another dice in the pot. We have to count down for a second objective. So we've now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 non-linear terrain, and also 1 objective. So it's 6 dice. Any 6s indicate another objective. There's 1 6, so we're now up to a 2 objective game. We then roll down for countdown. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10 dice to roll. We roll 2 6s, 1, 2, and we are 1 space from the battle beginning. So realistically, it's now the Union turn, and there's basically 1 spot on the countdown to battle clock, which means that it's very likely that this will end terrain placing phase. So the Union player's got a couple of decisions. So they can either assume that they are going to defend, which is not necessarily guaranteed at this moment, or they could try and strengthen their defence. So again, that's putting in more defensible type terrain. So the Union will pick some more snake fence, which is other terrain. They place 1 dice in the box there, placing it over here. So that'll give them a good defence against any attack over that side of the table. So snake fence is unique in as much as it is always a linear terrain that's always along one face of a square. And when you place it on its own, you're allowed to place 2 squares worth. That just puts 1 dice in the pot. Then we have to roll down for any more objectives, and then the countdown. So now we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 dice to see if there is another objective. So it's getting to the point where there's going to be a third. A third objective isn't necessarily a good thing for the defender because they will have less troops. It means they have to spread their forces thinner to defend 3 objectives. Having a few objectives is much easier to defend. So I'm going to throw 10 dice down to see if there's an objective, and I've thrown the last 6. So there is a third objective on the table, and that actually ends the game as well, or ends the road to battle. We don't need to throw for the road to war because the third objective always ends this phase. So we now need to determine the attack and defender. We can tidy all these dice away because all the dice that have now gone into the black pot need to be rolled. So each 6 is a kind of 1 towards their sort of attacking level. So we just throw all the dice that have been accumulated in the black box like this. We then need to take out the 6s. So we've got 2 there for the Confederates, 1 for the Union, and we can just disregard the rest of the dice. So it's 2 to 1. So the Confederates do attack by a level of 2 to 1, which is the smallest in the differences, a difference of 1. So that means that the defender must have 1 in 4 of his units in reserve. The last thing that we need to do is to determine where the objectives are going to be. These are placed by the defending player, so the Union player on this side, and they can be deployed in any row 1, 2 or 3 from their base. There are some rules about deploying objectives. They must be deployed in a space which has got some terrain in it. Now it can be either linear or non-linear, and they cannot be placed in adjacent squares to other objectives unless there are no other spaces available. So for the first one, I'm just going to place 1 objective there to defend the town, which means I cannot put an objective here, 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 or here, unless there are no other possible spaces. So the second one I can place there. Again, that really locks out all of these remaining spaces. And then over on this side, we're going to have to make sure that this piece of fence is our third objective. So effectively their objective is to defend this line across the table there like that. The next stage would be for them to deploy their army.